Have you ever found yourself just caught in this relentless cycle of thoughts? Maybe feeling like your mind is a runaway train, sort of pulling you away from any real sense of peace.
Yeah, or maybe, there's this persistent underlying unease, that nagging feeling that something about how you experience reality is just a bit off.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving deep, really deep, into a book that promises not just a new perspective, but a pretty radical shift in how we see ourselves and, well, everything around us.
We're talking about Eckhart Tolle's really transformative work, The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment.
And this isn't just, another self-help book.
Yeah.
It's widely seen as a phenomenon, something that's genuinely touched millions of people.
That's absolutely right. I mean, The Power of Now, it went way beyond its origins, didn't it? It became a #1 New York Times bestseller, sold, well over 2 million copies globally.
Wow.
And its core promise is just incredibly compelling. It offers this direct path to getting free from suffering, leading to a state of ongoing inner peace and real joy.
A direct path. I like the sound of that.
And what's really striking and kind of sets the stage for our deep dive today is how the foreword frames it. It was written by Russell E. DiCarlo, and he suggests Tolle's message lines up with what he calls a quantum leap in human evolution.
Quantum leap. That's a pretty big claim.
It is a fundamental shift in our collective worldview, basically. DiCarlo argues this emerging view directly challenges some really deeply ingrained Western myths, ideas that have shaped how we see ourselves and the universe for centuries.
Okay, let's unpack those. What's the first myth he highlights?
The first one is this belief that humanity has, reached its peak, its developmental pinnacle.
Right, like this is as good as it gets. Why does DiCarlo say that's a myth?
Well, he challenges it by saying humanity is actually capable of much more advanced stages of development, stages where extraordinary capacities like deep love, incredible vitality, profound intuition can really blossom.
So we haven't peaked.
That's the idea. We often assume we're done evolving consciousness-wise, but Tolle's work and DiCarlo's foreword, they encourage us to see that there are higher stages. The journey isn't over. There's more potential inside us.
It's about recognizing those stages exist and then maybe actively working towards them.
Exactly. Using methods like the ones Tolle suggests to actually reach them. It's about seeing our potential as, dynamic, not fixed.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, what's the second myth he tackles?
Myth number 2 is this really pervasive belief that we are fundamentally separate. Separate from each other, separate from nature, separate from the universe or the cosmos, as he puts it.
The idea that I'm me and everything else is not me.
Precisely. DiCarlo calls it the myth of other than me. And he argues this myth is responsible for a huge amount of the conflict, the suffering, the injustice we see everywhere.
How does he back that up?
He brings in Stan Grof's work, actually. Grof did a lot of research into non-ordinary states of consciousness, and his findings suggest that our individual psyche, our consciousness, is ultimately connected to all that is.
Connected to everything.
Yeah, there are no absolute boundaries between our individual self, the body ego, and the totality of existence. It's a pretty radical idea, isn't it?
It really is, that my consciousness isn't just locked inside my head.
Yeah.
How does that idea show up in, the real world?
Well, it connects directly to things like Dr. Larry Dossey's work on what he calls Era 3 medicine. This is where healing intentions, thoughts, feelings basically can apparently influence others, even far away, non-locally.
So thoughts having a physical effect at a distance.
Kind of, yeah. Which seems to contradict standard physics, which emphasizes separation and local cause and effect. But there's growing evidence for these non-local effects. It really makes you think, doesn't it? If our consciousness isn't truly separate, what does that mean for how we interact with the world, our responsibility?
It changes everything. And this interconnectedness, it leads right into myth number 3, right? The idea that the physical world, what we see, touch, measure, is all there is.
Absolutely. And this one feels especially relevant to Tolle's message because it hits right at how we experience reality.
How so?
DiCarlo suggests this materialistic view, the one that tends to dismiss anything you can't measure with scientific instruments. It clashes fundamentally with what's called the perennial philosophy.
The perennial philosophy. What's that exactly?
It's not a new idea. It's this thread of wisdom found across cultures and ages describing dimensions of reality beyond the purely physical, from dense matter all the way up to subtle, conscious, spiritual realms. Basically, there's more to reality than meets the eye.
A spiritual concept, mainly. Or does science touch on it?
Well, this is where it gets fascinating. Cutting-edge science, especially quantum physics, seems to almost echo these ancient ideas. You got David Bohm, a really respected quantum theorist.
Right, I've heard of him.
He talked about the explicit order, our physical world, and the implicate order, this hidden, non-physical, multidimensional reality underneath it all.
Okay.
And then there's the famous aspect experiment from 1982. It showed that two quantum particles, once connected, remain linked somehow. They influence each other instantly no matter how far apart they are. It's like spooky action at a distance, Einstein called it.
Suggesting hidden connections, dimensions we don't perceive.
Exactly, hinting at a deeper, interconnected reality beyond our normal senses. So, challenging those Western myths, maybe we haven't peaked, maybe we are interconnected, and maybe reality isn't just physical stuff.
Wow. Okay, so that's a huge shift in understanding reality itself. Which brings us right back to Eckhart Tolle's core message in The Power of Now. DiCarlo sums it up, saying humanity's deepest problem is deeply rooted in the mind itself.
Or even more specifically, our misidentification with mind. That's the key phrase. And this book, then, is positioned as a practical guide to navigating that profound inner shift.
And it's not just theory for Tolle, is it? His own life story is pretty intense.
Oh, absolutely. It underscores the urgency of his message. He's very open about living in almost continuous anxiety interspersed with periods of suicidal depression right up until he was about 30.
So he really lived the suffering he talks about overcoming.
He did. His insights weren't intellectual exercises. They were forged in really deep personal pain.
He describes this pivotal night, doesn't he? Just after his 29th birthday, waking up with absolute dread.
Yeah, an intensity he'd never felt before, a total loathing for the world, and even more for himself. And this thought kept looping. I cannot live with myself any longer.
Which is a strange thought when you stop and think about it.
Exactly. And that's what happened. He suddenly became aware of how peculiar that thought was. Am I one or two? He wondered. If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me. The I and the self that I cannot live with.
And then the realization.
Maybe only one of them is real. That question just stunned him. It completely stopped his thinking mind. Cold.
What happened next? He described something quite mystical.
He felt drawn into what he called a vortex of energy, heard words from deep inside his chest. Resist nothing. Then he fell into a void, lost consciousness, basically. No memory of what happened after that.
Until the morning.
Until the morning. Woke up to a bird chirping outside, but it was like he'd never truly heard a bird before. Saw an image of a precious diamond, felt if a diamond could make a sound, that would be it.
And when he opened his eyes,
the first light of dawn seemed like love itself. He looked around his room and realized he'd never truly seen it before. Everything felt fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence.
Wow. That profound awakening became the foundation for his whole teaching then. Not from books, but direct experience.
Exactly. And that experience directly shaped the unique structure of The Power of Now. It's written in this question and answer format.
Right, which came from his seminars and counseling sessions.
Yeah. He says the dialogue unfolds on two different levels.
Okay, what are those levels?
Level 1 is where he meticulously points out what is false in you. You know, the patterns of human unconsciousness, dysfunction, conflict, all that stuff.
Showing us the problem, essentially.
And crucially, showing us how not to make the false into a self, into an even bigger problem, because that's how it keeps going, right? Recognizing the false as false.
Okay, and level 2?
Level 2 is the how-to. It actively shows you how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind, how to enter and, importantly, sustain an enlightened state of consciousness now.
Not just understand it, but experience it.
That's the key. He emphasizes the words aren't just for your intellect. They're designed to draw you, the reader, into this new consciousness as you read, to give you a direct taste of enlightenment right there on the page.
Which explains the little pause symbols he uses throughout the book.
Yeah.
That symbol.
Yeah. He literally suggests you stop reading, become still, and just feel and experience the truth of what has just been said.
So it's an experiential book, not just intellectual.
Absolutely. It's meant to be lived. He says it speaks to the knower in you, reminding you of a truth you already know deep down but have forgotten.
And he advises not to get too hung up on the specific words or comparing them to other teaching.
Right. He calls words stepping stones, things to be left behind once you have the direct experience. The truth isn't in the words just point towards it.
Okay, so if the whole book guides us towards this inner transformation, what does Tolle pinpoint as the single biggest hurdle? The main obstacle to enlightenment.
He's incredibly clear on this. It's our identification with your mind.
Identification with the mind. That's it.
That's the core of it. And his definition of enlightenment itself is probably quite different from what many people imagine.
How does he define it?
He says it's not some, superhuman state for a chosen few. It's simply your natural state of felt oneness with being.
Oneness with being.
Or, as the Buddha put it, the end of suffering. It sounds almost too simple, right? But it's profoundly radical.
Why the negative definition, no suffering?
He says he uses that deliberately, so the mind can't grab onto it, turn it into another concept, another goal to strive for, another belief.
Ah, so it's not something you achieve, but something you uncover by letting go of what's blocking it. Makes sense. And this term being, it's central. How does he define that?
He describes being as the eternal, ever-present one life that's beyond all the forms that are born and die. It's also, he says, deep within every form as its innermost invisible and indestructible essence.
So it's like the life force within everything.
Kind of, but even deeper. It's the very essence. And crucially, you can't grasp it with your intellect. You can only know it through direct experience, when the mind is still, when your attention is fully, intensely in the now, that feeling realization of being, that deep inner presence that's enlightenment, according to Tolle.
Okay, so is being the same as God? People often ask that.
He addresses that. He acknowledges the word God has become, a bit empty for many people, misused, tied to rigid beliefs, mental images of some old man in the sky.
Yeah, it carries a lot of baggage.
It does. Whereas being, he presents as an open concept. It doesn't try to define the infinite. He says it's your very essence, accessible right now as the felt sense of your own presence, that feeling of I am before you add anything else, like I am this or I am that.
So it's closer to direct experience than the word God might be for some.
That's the suggestion, a small step from the word to the actual feeling it points to.
Okay, so if being is our natural state, why is it so hard to access? Why is this identification with the mind such a massive obstacle?
It's the greatest obstacle, he argues, because this identification makes thinking compulsive, just this incessant, uncontrollable stream of thoughts.
The mental chatter.
Exactly. He calls not to be able to stop thinking a dreadful affliction. But the irony is we barely notice it because almost everyone has it, so it seems normal.
And this noise blocks the connection to being.
It blocks that inner stillness, yeah. That's where the connection happens. He even criticizes Descartes' famous "I think, therefore I am." He calls it the most basic error because it equates our actual being, our existence, with just the act of thinking and our identity with those thoughts.
What are the results of being constantly identified with our thoughts? How does it affect us?
It creates this apparent separateness. We feel like isolated individuals, cut off. And that, he says, leads to this insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict. It blocks real connection, real relationship. It fuels the illusion of separateness from others, from nature, from that deeper essence.
He puts it pretty strongly, doesn't he, calling thinking a disease?
He does. He clarifies the mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. But the problem, the delusion, is when it uses you. When you believe you are your mind.
And this is where the ego comes in, right? How does Tolle define the ego in this context?
The ego, for Tolle, is a phantom self, a false sense of identity created by that unconscious identification with the mind.
A phantom self. Why phantom?
Because it doesn't have real substance. And it needs one thing constantly to survive, thinking. It has to keep thinking to stay alive.
And it doesn't live in the present moment.
Almost never. Its survival depends on clinging to the past, for its identity, its story, and projecting into the future for survival, for fulfillment, for that promise of happiness that's always later.
That whole one day when X happens, then I'll be happy trap.
That's pure ego, according to Tolle. Always pushing fulfillment into some imagined future, never allowing you to just be here now.
Okay, but a common worry might be, if I stop identifying with my thoughts, do I lose my intelligence, my ability to think clearly or be creative?
That's a really important question. Tolle is clear. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is just one small aspect of consciousness.
So intelligence isn't just thinking.
No. He points out that real creative breakthroughs, even for geniuses like Einstein, often come from moments of no mind, inner stillness, not from grinding thoughts.
So the mind isn't the source of creativity.
The mind itself is more like a survival machine, he says. Great for practical problems, but creativity, that bubbles up from a deeper place, from presence. Consciousness then uses the mind as a tool to express that creativity.
Okay, beyond thoughts, Tolle also talks a lot about emotion. How does he define emotion?
He puts it very simply. Emotion is the body's reaction to your mind, or a reflection of your mind in the body.
The direct physical reflection.
Yeah, and that's a crucial link we often miss. He gives examples. You have a hostile thought, maybe resentment towards someone, and bam, anger arises. Your body literally gets ready to fight.
Or if you feel threatened.
Exactly. A threatened thought leads to fear, and your body physically contracts. These aren't just abstract thoughts. They trigger real biochemical changes.
So emotions can be clues to our unconscious thoughts.
Absolutely. If you're not aware of your underlying thought patterns, your emotions are often the signal flag. The more identified you are with your thinking, especially negative patterns, the stronger the emotional charge in your body.
And what if you're totally cut off from your emotions? Numb.
He suggests that if you're cut off, those emotions will likely manifest physically instead, as physical problems, symptoms, even illness. He even floats the idea that strong, unobserved anger can unconsciously draw conflict or attacks into your life.
Wow. So if emotions reflect the mind, how should we actually deal with them? Especially the difficult ones, like anger or fear.
His core advice is to bring awareness to them. How? By focusing your attention directly on the inner energy field of your body. Feel the emotion as energy.
Not analyzing it, just feeling it.
Right. And he offers a really useful tip. If your thoughts and emotions seem to conflict, the thought will be the lie. The emotion will be the truth.
Why is that?
Because emotions are a more direct, less filtered reflection of the mind's underlying state. Watching an emotion, just like watching a thought, changes your relationship to it. You step back, you become the watcher, the observing presence.
And that observation brings the unconscious patterns into the light.
Exactly. The act of observing is the bringing into awareness. It dissolves the unconsciousness.
He also talks about something called primordial pain. What's that about?
Yeah, this is fascinating. He argues that all our different emotions, with anger, fear, sadness, even joy to some extent, are actually just modifications of one fundamental, primordial, undifferentiated emotion.
One root emotion. What is it?
It comes, he says, from that fundamental loss of awareness of who you are beyond name and form, that core sense of separation. He simply calls it pain.
So pain is the root, encompassing feelings like threat, abandonment, incompleteness.
Exactly. And the mind, with its constant thinking and striving, tries to fight or fix this pain, but it can only ever cover it up temporarily, because the mind itself is rooted in the identification that causes the pain.
So the mind can't solve the problem it creates, like trying to put out fire with gasoline, as you said earlier.
Precisely. It's part of the problem, not the solution.
Okay, that makes sense. So if emotional pain comes from this root pain, what about the positive states, like true love, joy, or peace? Where do they come from?
This is where the shift happens. Tolle says authentic love, joy, and peace are inseparable from your natural state of interconnectedness with being.
So they're not just fleeting emotions.
No. They're glimpses or really expressions of your true nature. They surface when there's a gap in the stream of thought. Maybe you see incredible beauty or face sudden danger, and the mind just stops for a second.
Any in that gap?
These deeper states emerge. He says they're beyond the emotions on a much deeper level. And importantly, they have no opposite.
No opposites. Unlike happiness, sadness.
Exactly. Because they arise from beyond the mind's dualistic way of operating. They're not part of the pain-pleasure cycle.
So true joy isn't the same as the happiness we get when something good happens externally.
Definitely not. He distinguishes pleasure, which comes from outside, as temporary, part of the cycle, from true joy. Joy arises from within. It's uncaused. It comes from connecting with being.
And what about love? He redefines that too, doesn't he?
He does. He suggests that what we often call love is frequently more like addictive clinging, a needy condition rooted in ego and lack. And because it's rooted in lack, it can flip into its opposite, hate, resentment, attack, very quickly.
So many love relationships cycle between love and hate.
He observes that, yeah. After the initial euphoria wears off, that oscillation is common because the underlying egoic structure hasn't changed.
This idea of craving fulfillment from outside,
Yeah.
it reminds me of Buddhism.
Yes, very much so. It aligns perfectly with the Buddha's insight that all cravings are the mind seeking salvation or fulfillment in external things and in the future as a substitute for the joy of being.
And Tolle encourages us to actually be the Buddha, not just quote him.
Right, to become the awakened one through our own direct experience. He sums this whole section up by saying human pain exists on two levels. The pain we create now through resistance and mind identification, and the accumulated past pain stored in us.
Which he calls the pain body.
Exactly, which sets the stage for how we can start moving beyond all this pain.
Okay, so if the mind and its identification are the source, and emotions are the reflection, what's the practical way out? Tolle is very direct. Consciousness is the way out of pain.
He really is. He states flat out that the greater part of human pain is unnecessary. It's self-created as long as the unobserved mind runs your life.
Self-created how?
Through non-acceptance. Through unconscious resistance to what is, to the present moment. At the thought level, resistance shows up as judgment. Emotionally, it's negativity.
And the more we resist the present, the more we suffer.
Directly proportional, he says, which means, conversely, the more you are able to honor and accept the now, the more you are free of pain.
Okay, accept the now. That sounds simple, but also really hard. What if the now is genuinely awful, unpleasant, painful?
Yeah.
How do you just accept that?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Tolle tackles it head on. Even if the present moment is unacceptable, unpleasant, or awful, his advice is to first recognize it is as it is.
Just acknowledge the reality of it.
Yes. And then observe how your mind instantly labels it, judges it. He says this continuous sitting in judgment is precisely what creates the ongoing suffering.
So watching the mind's reaction is key.
It is. By becoming the watcher, you step out of the resistance patterns. You allow the moment to simply be without that internal battle. And that non-resistance, he says, gives you an immediate taste of true inner peace.
So it's not passive resignation.
No, not at all. His mantra is accept, then act. Accept the isness of the moment fully, as if you had chosen it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. Then, from that place of acceptance, you can act if action is needed.
That's a really powerful shift. Okay, you mentioned past pain earlier. How does Tolle address that accumulated stuff? What exactly is this pain body?
Right, the pain body. This is a really central concept in the book. He explains that every emotional pain we've ever felt, childhood stuff, adult hurts, traumas, leaves behind a residue, an energy residue.
Like emotional scar tissue?
Kind of. And these residues merge together, forming a negative energy field that literally occupies our body and mind. He asks us to visualize it almost as an invisible entity living within us.
The emotional pain body. And it's not always active.
No, it has two modes. Dormant and active. For some people, it's active pretty much all the time, coloring everything. For others, it lies sleeping, waiting to be triggered.
What triggers it?
Anything, really. Especially situations that resonate with old pain patterns. Intimate relationships are a very common trigger, he notes. Past injustice, abandonment, betrayal, anything that hits those old buttons can wake it up.
And when it wakes up, what happens? What does it feel like?
It can manifest in a huge range of ways. From subtle stuff like irritation or a gloomy mood, like a whining child, he says, all the way to a really vicious and destructive monster.
Leading to?
Physical or emotional violence, really self-destructive thoughts, creating drama, making yourself or others miserable, triggering illness, even suicidal feelings. He says, watch out for any sign of unhappiness in yourself, in whatever form. That might just be the pain body waking up.
So it sounds like this entity feeds on negativity. How does it survive?
That's exactly its survival mechanism. The pain body can only survive if it gets you to unconsciously identify with it. It needs to feed.
What's a food?
More pain, experiences that generate anger, hatred, grief, drama, destructiveness, any negative emotion. As Tolle says starkly, pain can only feed on pain.
And he says that once it takes you over, you actually want more pain. That sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy, but he argues it's an unconscious drive. Once the pain body hijacks your thinking and emotions, you want more pain.
Yeah.
You unconsciously play the victim or the perpetrator, just keeping the cycle going. But he stresses, nobody is consciously insane. It's an unconscious compulsion, not a deliberate choice to suffer.
Okay, so if it's this unconscious phantom, how do we deal with it? How do we stop it controlling us?
He says the pain body is fundamentally afraid of the light of your consciousness. It's an insubstantial phantom that can't survive your direct present awareness.
So awareness is the key.
Yes. The moment you observe it, meaning you feel its energy field within you and consciously turn your attention towards it, the identification breaks. You're no longer it. You're the awareness watching it.
And that brings in presence.
A higher dimension of consciousness has come in, he says. Presence. You become the witness or the watcher. And once that happens, the pain body can't use you anymore. It can't feed through you. Its energy supply gets cut off.
So it's not about fighting it or suppressing it.
Absolutely not. Fighting it just gives it more energy. It's about observing it. And that very observation leads to something he calls transmutation.
Transmutation.
Like alchemy.
Exactly like alchemy.
Oh.
He says, unconsciousness creates it. Consciousness transmutes it into itself. He quotes St. Paul. Everything is shown up by being exposed to the light, and whatever is exposed to the light itself becomes light.
So the light of awareness transforms the pain. Yes. You don't fight it. You simply watch it. And watching here means accepting its presence without judgment. He describes the pain body as trapped life energy that got distorted into something anti-life through resistance.
Does it disappear instantly once you observe it?
Not necessarily. It has momentum, he says, like a spinning wheel that keeps turning for a while even after you stop pushing it. You might still feel physical aches or emotional residue. The key is to stay present, stay conscious during that time. Be the ever-alert guardian of your inner space.
Don't let your thoughts feed it again.
Precisely. If your thinking starts aligning with the pain body's feelings, poor me, they always do this, etc., you're inadvertently refueling it.
So it really is like transmuting lead into gold, suffering into consciousness.
That's the explicit analogy he uses. Sustained conscious attention severs the link between the pain body and your thoughts. That's the alchemy. Suffering turns into consciousness.
Okay, so for someone listening, what's the practical takeaway? How do you actually do this process of dissolving the pain body?
Tolle's instructions are very clear and direct. Step 1, focus attention on the feeling inside you. Step 2, know that it is the pain body. Acknowledge it. Step 3, accept that it is there. Don't fight it. Step 4, don't think about it. No analyzing, no judging, no storytelling about why it's there. And crucially, don't make an identity for yourself out of it. Finally, stay present and continue to be the observer.
Be the watcher.
Be the watcher. Recognize that the one who observes, the silent watcher, is your true power. It's the power of your own conscious presence that does the dissolving.
He also offers a specific insight for women regarding the pain body, does he?
Yes, and it's a very compassionate and, I think, empowering point. He notes that many women experience the collective female pain body awakening with particular intensity around menstruation.
The collective female pain body.
Yeah, the idea that beyond personal pain, there's this shared field of suffering accumulated over millennia of subjugation, violence, loss related to childbirth, etc., that many women tap into unconsciously.
And menstruation can trigger this.
It often does, he suggests. And this can be a potent opportunity for spiritual practice. If a woman can stay alert and present during this time, observing the emotions and sensations without getting swept away, without identifying with them, he says a rapid transmutation of both past personal and collective pain is possible.
But there's a catch, right, about identity.
Yes. The big obstacle is if a woman unconsciously makes an identity out of her pain. If being a victim or someone who suffers becomes part of her sense of self, she'll naturally resist healing it. Because healing would feel like a loss of self.
Because a victim identity believes the past is more powerful than the present.
Exactly. So his advice is profound. Don't use the pain for identity. Use it for enlightenment instead. Turn that potentially difficult time into a powerful practice of presence and transmutation. Be the knowing, the awareness.
That's a really important perspective. Okay, moving on slightly, Tolle connects a lot of our inner turmoil to the origin of fear and this relentless ego search for wholeness. How does he separate everyday caution from what he calls psychological fear?
Good distinction. He says knowing not to touch fire isn't fear, it's just common sense knowledge. Psychological fear is different. It's the ego's constant companion.
Why is fear so tied to the ego?
Because the ego, being this phantom self, feels inherently vulnerable, insecure. It's always perceiving threats, always needing to defend itself. And since emotion is the body's reaction to the mind, the ego's constant, often unconscious message of danger, I'm under threat, generates this pervasive background hum of psychological fear.
Fear of what specifically?
It manifests as fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being hurt, countless things. But ultimately, Tolle argues, all psychological fear boils down to the ego's fear of death, of annihilation, the fear of its own non-existence.
Its own phantom nature makes it terrified of disappearing.
Precisely. He gives a great everyday example, that compulsive need many of us have to be right in an argument.
Ah, yes, the need to win the argument.
If you're totally identified with your mental position, and then that comes from the ego's deep-seated sense of lack or incompleteness, of not being whole. This feeling is what fuels the compulsive chase after. Well, everything. Possessions, money, success, power, approval, special relationships.
All trying to fill that inner hole.
Exactly. Trying to find something external to finally feel complete. But Tolle points out, even when you get those things, the hole is still there, that it is bottomless. The ego just shifts its focus to the next thing, the next desire. Satisfaction is always in the future.
Which highlights the impermanence of all these ego identifications. If our identity is built on things like our job, our status, our relationships, what happens?
It means our sense of self is built on shaky ground. Because all those things we identify with social roles, possessions, status, knowledge, looks, relationships, personal history, beliefs. Tolle states bluntly, none of these is you.
None of them.
Not your true self. And more profoundly, all of these things you will have to relinquish sooner or later. Life will take them away, or death will.
Which leads to that deep saying he shares.
Yes. The secret of life is to die before you die and find that there is no death.
What does that mean, die before you die?
It's not literal death. It's about consciously letting go of the false, impermanent, egoic self before life forces you to, through loss or physical death. By letting go of the illusion, you discover the eternal, true self, the being that was there all along, the part of you that transcends death. That's where real peace and freedom are found.
A truly radical idea. So if this inner shift means letting go of who we think we are, where do we even begin to look for our true self? Tolle says emphatically, don't seek yourself in the mind.
That's the absolute pivot point, because, as he says, the problems of the mind cannot be solved on the level of the mind. You can study the mind, analyze its dysfunction endlessly, become a brilliant psychologist.
But that doesn't get you beyond the mind.
Exactly. It keeps you operating within its framework. And the ego, very cleverly, loves problems. It often makes problems part of your identity. I'm the person with anxiety. I'm the one who always fails in relationships.
So being free from the problem feels like losing yourself.
Paradoxically, yes. There's often an unconscious investment in keeping the pain or the problem alive because it defines who you think you are.
So once we recognize this dynamic, what's the practical step?
He says once you truly recognize the root of the dysfunction identification with the mind and the emotional pain body, you step out of it. You become present.
Become present.
Yeah. When you're present, you can allow the mind to be there, to do its job as a tool, but you're not tangled up in its stories, not identified with its contents. The mind itself isn't a problem. Seeking your identity in it is the problem.
This focus on present brings us to another huge cornerstone of his teaching. We need to end the delusion of time. That sounds pretty abstract. What does he mean?
It is abstract, but grasping it can change everything. Tolle makes this profound statement. Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now.
Okay, unpack that.
What we call the past is just a memory trace, a mental record stored in the mind, which gets reactivated now in the present moment.
And the future?
The future is simply an imagined now, a mental projection created now. He says the past and future have no reality of their own. Their apparent reality is entirely borrowed from the now.
So they only exist as thoughts or concepts in the present moment.
That's the essence of it. And he says the mind, which operates within time, can't fully grasp this. But the moment you do grasp it, even for an instant,
What happens?
there is a shift in consciousness from mind to being, from time to presence. Suddenly, he says, everything feels alive, vibrant, radiating energy. You experience the world directly, not through the filter of time-bound thought.
And this shift, this understanding, he calls it the key to the spiritual dimension.
Yes. He points out that the shift often happens spontaneously in life or death emergencies.
Oh, so?
In those moments, your normal personality, the one with a past and a future, just recedes. It's replaced by this intense, calm, alert presence. You act from pure instinct, pure awareness, without time for thought.
Which might explain why some people love dangerous activities, rock climbing, racing.
Exactly. It forces them into that intensely alive present state, free from the mind's usual chatter and problems, even if only temporarily.
And this focus on the properne. Now, it's not unique to Tolle, is it? He points to spiritual masters throughout history.
Oh, absolutely. He shows how this has always been the core message. Think of Jesus. Take no thought for the morrow. Or, nobody who puts his hands to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God.
Not just moral advice, but pointers to present.
Direct pointers. Even observing the flowers, how they're not anxious about tomorrow that's living in the timeless now.
How does Zen connect to this?
Zen, he says, is all about walking along the razor's edge of now. Being so completely present that no problem, no suffering, nothing that is not who you are in your essence can survive in you.
Like Rinzai's question. What at this moment is lacking?
Exactly. A question designed not for a mental answer, but to pull you instantly into the absolute sufficiency of the now. Sufism, too. The Sufi is the son of time present. Rumi's powerful line, past and future veil God from our sight, burn up both of them with fire.
And Meister Eckhart.
The medieval mystic, Eckhart, put it so clearly. Time is what keeps the light from reaching us. There is no greater obstacle to God than time. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? If time is the obstacle and suffering needs time to exist,
Then escaping psychological time is escaping suffering.
that's the implication.
Okay, so if time is the delusion and the now is the key, how do we practically access the power of the now? The listener's example of seeing the tree differently without the screen of mind seems like a good illustration.
That's a perfect example. That moment of pure seeing, without labels, without concepts about the tree, that's it. It's a different kind of knowing, he calls it. Direct, intuitive.
And it doesn't destroy the beauty.
No, it reveals it. It contains deep love and reverence for all that is. The mind only knows facts about the tree. Being, presence, knows the tree directly. The sacredness of life is revealed in those moments.
So it's about consciously choosing to step out of the mind's default mode.
Exactly. He says we need to actively break the old pattern of present moment denial and present moment resistance. Make it a practice to withdraw attention from past and future when they're not needed for practical things. Step out of the time dimension as much as possible.
What if you find your mind constantly drifting?
Start by just observing that tendency. Watch how the mind tries to escape the now. You'll see it projecting a future that's either better, creating hope, illusion, or worse, creating anxiety, illusion. Both are mirages. And here's the magic key he offers. The moment you realize you are not present, you are present.
Ah, the awareness itself brings you back.
Yes, the act of noticing your absence is presence arising. When you observe your mind's patterns, you're no longer trapped inside them. You're the watcher.
And the energy that was fueling the compulsive thinking gets freed up, becomes presence.
That's the idea. And this doesn't mean you can't use time practically. In fact, being more present makes your mind sharper when you do need it for planning or learning.
Which brings us to that crucial distinction he makes. Clock time versus psychological time.
Yes, clock time is practical. Setting alarms, making appointments, learning from past mistakes, setting future goals. We need it to function in the world. The enlightened person uses clock time efficiently.
But is free from.
Psychological time, which Tolle describes as identification with the past and continuous compulsive projection into the future.
And he calls psychological time a mental disease. Why so strong?
He points to its devastating collective consequences. Think about destructive ideologies, communism, fascism, whatever, where a belief in some future paradise, some glorious end state, was used to justify horrific actions in the present. Millions killed for a future heaven.
Creating a present hell in the name of a future utopia.
Exactly. A chilling example of psychological time running rampant.
And he urges us to see how this plays out in our own lives, too.
Yes. Are we always trying to get somewhere other than where you are? Is most of our doing just a means to an end, always waiting for fulfillment around the corner?
That normal state of mind obscures the present.
It obscures the infinite creative potential that lie concealed in the place. Now, he says, life loses its vibrancy, its freshness. The mind becomes obsessed with the future as an escape from an unsatisfactory present. Life becomes a waiting room.
And living constantly in psychological time, seeking the future, fuels negativity.
Absolutely. He states it directly. All negativity is caused by an accumulation of psychological time and denial of the present. Think about it. Unease, anxiety, stress, worry, all too much future. Guilt, regret, resentment, bitterness, non-forgiveness, all too much past.
So freedom from negativity requires freedom from psychological time.
That's the core message. Most people find it hard to believe a state free of all negativity is even possible. But that's the liberated state all spiritual teachings point towards. The time-bound mind itself is the ultimate problem. And he says urgently, you are at that point now. There is no salvation in time. Freedom is only ever possible now.
Okay, but what if someone listening is in a genuinely difficult situation right now? Maybe illness, financial hardship, relationship breakdown. How can they possibly be free now?
That's a vital question. Tolle offers very practical guidance. He says when you're full of problems, there's no mental space for anything new, no room for solutions. So the first step is make some room, create some space.
How do you create space when you feel overwhelmed?
By consciously finding the life underneath your life situation.
Finding the life underneath. What does that mean in practice?
It means dropping into your senses, bringing your attention fully, completely into the present moment. He guides us. Be where you are. Look around. Just look. Don't interpret. See the light, the shapes, the colors, hear the sounds and the silence under the sounds. Touch something. Feel your breath. Feel the life energy inside your body.
Just become intensely aware of the present sensory experience.
Yes. And crucially, allow everything to be within and without. accept the isness of the moment. This, he says, is how you make the simple choice, the very radical choice, to stop creating more pain for yourself right now.
Stop adding resistance to what already is.
Exactly. If you stop creating pain for yourself, you stop creating it for others, you stop contaminating the world with negativity. It's not about ignoring problems, but about approaching them from presence and clarity, not from resistance and reaction.
This shift sounds massive. Not just personal, but potentially world-changing. He calls it a quantum leap in the evolution of consciousness.
He really frames it that way. He emphasizes we're talking about breaking deeply ingrained mind patterns that have dominated human life for eons, patterns that have caused unimaginable suffering. He doesn't mince words. He calls this mind-identified state unconsciousness or insanity.
And he sees this transformation as essential for survival.
Our only chance of survival as a species, he says. It's that critical.
How can we tell if we're caught in psychological time during our daily activities? Is there a simple test?
There is, and it's wonderfully simple. Just ask yourself, is there joy, ease, and lightness in what I am doing?
Joy, ease, and lightness.
If the answer is no, then psychological time is likely taken over. And the solution isn't necessarily to change what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Give much more attention to the doing than to the result. Give your fullest attention to whatever the moment presents. That implies moment-to-moment acceptance, bringing presence into the action itself.
And when that compulsive striving away from the now ceases, what happens? What fills that space?
The joy of being naturally flows in. You start to feel this deep presence, this unshakable stillness, this peace that isn't dependent on whether things are going well or badly outside.
You stop needing the future for fulfillment.
Exactly. Neither failure nor success has the power to change your inner state of being, because you found the life underneath your life situation, your timeless essence, always here.
So a deeper sense of self emerges, one not based on external validation.
Precisely. Your sense of self comes from being, not your past story or future hopes. That psychological need to become something else just vanishes, he says, quite profoundly. In the deeper dimension of being, you are complete and whole now.
You can still have goals, work towards things.
Oh, yes. You can play the game of life, pursue goals, but without the illusory expectations that anything or anybody in the future will save you or make you happy.
And the fear goes away.
The fundamental fear diminishes because your happiness isn't demanded from external conditions. It arises from within. He sums up this state beautifully. Everything is honored, but nothing matters. In essence, he says, you have succeeded already.
Wow. You have succeeded already. That's powerful. Okay, so if this presence is the goal, what does it actually mean to be in the state of presence? Tolle says, it's not what you think it is?
Right. You literally cannot think about presence. The mind can't grasp it. He says understanding presence is being present. It's a state, not a concept.
He offers an experiment to get a feel for it.
Yes, a simple but profound one. He suggests you close your eyes and silently ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be.
Okay.
Then just wait for that thought. Be intensely alert, like a cat watching a mouse hole. He explains that as long as you are in a state of intense presence, you are free of thought. You are still, yet highly alert.
And the moment your attention dips,
thought rushes back in. Presence is that gap, that alertness between thoughts. He even mentions Zen masters hitting students a sharp hit meant they drifted into thought, become absent, unconscious.
So how do we stay anchored in presence day to day?
He advises being deeply rooted within yourself, which means inhabit your body fully by consciously keeping some attention on the inner energy field of your body, feeling that subtle aliveness, that tingling from within. That feeling acts as an anchor rooting you right here, right now.
That makes sense. He also talks about the esoteric meaning of waiting. This isn't bored, restless waiting, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's a totally qualitatively different kind of waiting. It demands complete, unwavering alertness.
Like the parables Jesus told.
Exactly. The servant waiting for the master, the wise women with their lamps ready. It's about being absolutely awake, absolutely still, with all your attention focused in the now. In that state, he says, your personality, the you, with the past and future, is hardly there anymore.
But you're still yourself.
More so. Nothing of value is lost. You are still essentially yourself. In fact, you are more fully yourself than you ever were before, because you're connected to that deeper dimension of being.
Many people, like our listener, get glimpses of this in nature. awestruck moments.
Yes, he calls those moments satori flashes of no mind, total presence. When you're truly stunned by the beauty of a sunset or listening deeply to a forest sound, your mind has to be still. You drop your personal baggage for a moment.
And you perceive something deeper.
You perceive a nameless essence, a deep inner holy essence shining through the form. He even wonders if that essence and your own presence are actually the same thing.
So it's not the mind that recognizes or creates beauty.
Fascinating point he makes. Mind can neither recognize nor create beauty. Beauty is perceived directly, in presence. The moment a thought comes in to label it, oh, what a lovely flower, the direct experience is gone, replaced by a memory, a concept of beauty.
So the gap between perception and thought is important.
The wider the time gap between perception and thought, the more depth there is to you as a human being, he says, meaning the more conscious you are. He even laments that much modern art and architecture lacks beauty because the creators are trapped in their minds, unable to access that deeper, present source.
This leads to the ultimate points, realizing pure consciousness. What does he mean when he says, when you become conscious of being, what is really happening is that being becomes conscious of itself?
It sounds complex, but the idea is that presence is consciousness becoming aware of itself. Life-attaining self-consciousness. It's not something you need to intellectually figure out before you can be present. The being present is the realization.
And how does this fit into the grand scheme, the evolution of consciousness?
He talks about this vast journey. Consciousness taking on forms, thought forms, material forms. The world arises. He mentions the Hindu idea of Leela, the divine play. Consciousness gets disguised in forms, identifies with them, loses itself.
Leading to the ego and fear and suffering.
Right, but that very apparent dysfunction, that suffering, paradoxically creates the pressure needed for consciousness to eventually disidentify from form, to wake up to itself at a deeper level. It's an evolutionary driver.
What about common escapes like drugs or alcohol? How do they fit in?
He sees them as delaying the process. They might offer temporary relief from the suffering mind, but they simply keep you stuck in dysfunction. They prevent the breakdown of old mind structures and the emergence of higher consciousness. We can't go back to unconsciousness. The path is forward, into greater awareness.
And this forward movement, this transformation of consciousness, is what he calls the second coming of Christ, not a person returning.
No, definitely not a person. It's a transformation of human consciousness, a shift from time to presence, from thinking to pure consciousness. It's the individual realization. I am within you. I am here. I am now.
And true teachers help reflect our own presence back to us.
Exactly. He warns against egos being drawn to bigger egos. Darkness cannot recognize light. Only light can recognize light. A true teacher helps you access your own inner light, your own presence. And doing this work in groups can amplify that presence, helping free the collective consciousness too.
Okay, diving even deeper into the practicalities, Tolle emphasizes the inner body. We touched on inhabiting the body, stay present, but he sees it as a direct gateway to being itself.
Yes. He gently reminds us again, please stop trying to understand being. It's not an object for the mind. Being is felt as the ever-present I am, beyond name and form. Feeling that, abiding in that rooted state that's enlightenment, that's the freedom Jesus spoke of.
Freedom from the illusion of being just the body and mind.
Freedom from that illusion of the self, the core error, and also freedom from fear and freedom from sin, which he equates directly with unconsciousness or insanity.
The word sin can be loaded for some people. How does he suggest approaching terms like that?
He's very aware of that. He advises, don't get stuck on the level of words. Words like sin or God are just signposts, abstractions. You don't know honey by analyzing the word. You know it by tasting it.
So don't worship the signposts.
Exactly. Don't get attached to the mental idol. If sin doesn't work for you, call it unconsciousness or insanity. The label isn't the point. But he is direct. Given humanity's history, of course there is something wrong with you, not as a moral judgment, but as an observation of our collective unconscious state.
So how does the physical body lead us to being? If identification with form is the illusion, it seems paradoxical.
It does, and it's a really profound point. He explains the visible body is just the outer shell, a distorted perception of a deeper reality. The invisible inner body, the animating presence within you. To inhabit the body means feeling this aliveness inside, sensing the energy field. And in doing that, you realize your true self is beyond the outer form.
It's an inward journey.
Into stillness, peace, vibrant life. You realize you're connected to something so vast, so immeasurable and sacred.
How do we practically access this invisible inner body?
You need to reclaim consciousness from the mind, he says. Stop feeding the compulsive thinking. One powerful way is to take the focus of your attention away from thinking and direct it into the body. Feel being directly as that invisible energy field.
Could you guide us through a quick practice for someone listening?
Sure. He suggests close your eyes, if that feels right. Gently bring your attention inside your body. Feel the aliveness there, maybe as a subtle tingling, warmth, a general sense of energy. Feel the whole body simultaneously as one energy field. Do not start to think about it. Feel it.
Just feel.
Just feel. It's formless, limitless, and unfathomable. Even if it's subtle at first, just focus on whatever sensation is there. Then, when you open your eyes, try to keep some attention inside, feeling the inner body even as you engage with the world. That inner body, he says, is the threshold between your form identity and your essence identity.
Many spiritual traditions historically seem to condemn the body, though. How does Tolle's view fit?
He addresses that. He sees that condemnation as the disassociation, part of humanity's fall into the illusion of separateness, making us fear our own animal nature. But he points to the lost teachings. The body doesn't block reality, it conceals your immortal reality within it.
So don't fight the body.
Do not fight against the body, he urges, for in doing so, you are fighting against your own reality. You are your body. The invisible inner body isn't something to escape. It's the doorway into being, connecting you to the unmanifested, the timeless, deathless one life.
So the real key is staying connected to this inner body continuously. What are the benefits?
Yes, the goal is permanent connectedness with your inner body, feeling it throughout your day. This, he says, will rapidly deepen and transform your life. Why? Because directing consciousness inward raises its vibrational frequency.
And higher frequency means?
Negativity literally cannot affect you as much. It operates at a lower frequency. You also start attracting circumstances that match your higher state. Plus, it acts as a powerful anchor in the mind. Now, stopping you getting lost in your mind or the external world.
So practice feeling the inner body all the time, even during mundane tasks.
Especially then. Use those wasted moments waiting in traffic, standing in line, as precious opportunities to go deeper into the night through body awareness.
He also mentions physical and psychic immune systems.
Yes. He claims inhabiting the body strengthens both. Your physical immunity improves, and your psychic immune system gets stronger too, protecting you from negative mental emotional fields from others or media. Higher vibration means lower frequencies just pass through. He even suggests it's a potent form of self-healing.
What if your mind is just too busy? Hard to feel the body.
His advice then is, let the breath take you into the body. Conscious breathing, just watching the breath without changing it, is a powerful meditation. Feel the belly rise and fall. You can visualize light filling the body. Eventually, the focus shifts back to feeling the inner energy field. His ultimate advice. Think with your whole body, not just your head.
And this full body awareness extends to how we listen, the art of listening.
Yes. When listening to someone, don't just listen with your analyzing, judging mind, busy formulating your reply. Listen with your whole body. Feel your own inner energy field while you listen.
What does that do?
It pulls attention away from your own thinking, creating a still, receptive space inside. You can truly listen without mental interference. You're giving the other person space to be, which is an incredibly rare and precious gift.
Because most people are just trapped in their own thoughts while pretending to listen.
Exactly. He observes that most human relationships consist mainly of minds interacting with each other, not of human beings communicating, being in communion. That's why there's so much conflict.
So inner body awareness allows for real communion.
It creates that clear space of no mind within which the relationship can flower. Connection beyond ego.
Okay, we've explored the inner body as a gateway. Now let's discuss portals into the unmanifested itself. Sounds very deep.
It is deep. The inner body meditation we just talked about is a primary portal. Relax, breathe deeply, feel the inner energy, let go of images, merge with the feeling, and eventually you might feel you transcend the physical form into pure presence.
He makes a distinction between the unmanifested and chi, or life energy, right?
Yes, that's important. The unmanifested is not chi. Think of chi as the river of energy flowing through you. The unmanifested is the still, silent ocean, the source from which the river arises. Chi is movement. The unmanifested is stillness.
So directing consciousness inward traces chi back to its source.
To that point of absolute stillness, which is nevertheless vibrant with life, the threshold between the manifested and unmanifested, keeping some attention inward at all times keeps that portal open, making you a bridge between the worlds.
He even says we connect unconsciously every night.
In dreamless sleep, yes, we merge with the source, recharge, but he asks, what if we could do it consciously? Though he admits it's impossible to imagine it because that state has no content. It's beyond thought.
Beyond the inner body, what are some other portals Tolle describes?
The now itself is the main one, essential to all others. Dissolving psychological time makes you aware of the unmanifested directly as presence and indirectly by feeling the God essence in everything. Remember Jesus saying, split wood, I am there. Lift a stone and you will find me there.
Right. And another portal is simply stopping thought.
Exactly, even for a moment. Taking one fully conscious breath, looking at a flower without any mental commentary, just pure seeing. Meditation is essentially about creating these gaps in the mind stream. The mind's chatter is like an opaque screen blocking our view of the formless essence. Intense presence makes the mind stop, opening the portal.
And surrender, how is that a portal?
Surrender, letting go of inner resistance to what is incredibly powerful. Resistance strengthens the ego, makes your form identity hard and dense, closing the portal. Surrender softens that identity, makes it somewhat transparent, allowing the unmanifested to shine through you. It reveals your formless nature.
And then there's the really mind-bending one. Space itself is a portal. He says nothing can exist without nothing.
Yeah, this requires a bit of a conceptual leap. Just like sound needs silence, he argues, things need no thing space to exist. Every object comes from nothing, is surrounded by nothing, returns to nothing.
Physics agrees the solidity of matter is mostly illusion, right? Mostly empty space.
Almost entirely empty space at the subatomic level. Quorum is emptiness. Emptiness is form, as the Heart Sutra says.
So space isn't just emptiness.
No. He describes space as the appearance of the unmanifested as an externalized phenomenon. But you can't understand it intellectually. You can't do a PhD on nothing, he jokes.
How does it become a portal then?
By consciously withdrawing attention from the objects in space. External things. When you do that, you automatically withdraw attention from your mind objects, internal thoughts. Becoming aware of the empty space around you makes you aware of the space of no mind, of pure consciousness, the unmanifested within you.
So outer space and inner space, no mind, are connected.
They are two aspects of the same thing, the same nothing, he says. Silence and space. Externalizations of inner stillness, the infinitely creative womb of all existence. He worries most humans are tragically unaware of this inner dimension, knowing the world but not its source.
And this connects to the true nature of space and time.
Yes. He says space and time arise together when the one becomes two, when separation appears. Space, being no thing, was never created. It is the unmanifested, externalized, the body of God, or being.
And that same vastness is within us as no mind.
Miraculously, yes. He connects this to Einstein's space-time continuum. Externally, space and time are relative, illusory, but they point to infinity and eternity, attributes of God being. Internally, their equivalents are no mind and presence. They're ultimately one. The world is needed, he says, for the unmanifested to realize itself. If there were no illusion, there would be no enlightenment.
And that's where we come in.
You are here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. That is how important you are. Even death isn't an end, but a portal, the death of the false self, revealing death itself as an illusion. Painful only if we cling to illusion.
Okay, let's shift focus now to enlightened relationships. Many people hope to find wholeness or enlightenment through a relationship, especially romantic love. Tolle offers a very different view.
He does. He clarifies first that true salvation is fulfillment, peace, life in all its fullness. It's being who you truly are, feeling that inner joy that depends on nothing outside. In religious terms, to know God as your own innermost essence.
That's the goal: freedom from fear, suffering, lack, compulsive thought.
Yes. And the mind constantly tells you you cannot get there from here, that you need time or need to become something else or find someone else to complete you. But Tolle insists, here and now is the only point from where you can get there. You get there by realizing you are there already. The now is the only access point.
So how does this apply to those intense love-hate relationships many people experience?
He states pretty bluntly, unless and until you access the consciousness frequency of presence, all relationships, and particularly intimate relationships, are deeply flawed and ultimately dysfunctional. Why? Because in the mind-identified state, the positive already contains within itself the as-yet unmanifested negative. Love and hate are two sides of the same egoic coin.
This is different from true love.
Completely. True love, he says, has no opposite because it arises from beyond the mind. It's a continuous state of being, which is still very rare in the world.
So what we often call romantic love is actually an addiction.
He describes it as deeply addictive, yes. It feels amazing initially because the other person seems to fill that inner lack like a drug. But because it's based on neediness, it quickly leads to possessiveness, jealousy, manipulation, control, fear of loss.
And if the drug is withdrawn, if the person leaves,
it can trigger intense hostility or devastating grief. He asks a crucial question. Can love change into its opposite in an instant? Was it love in the first place, or just an addictive grasping and clinging?
why do we get addicted like this?
Because these relationships seem to promise liberation from a deep-seated state of fear, need, lack, and incompleteness that's inherent in the normal, unenlightened state. Physically, we feel incomplete, male-female. Psychologically, the lack is even greater.
Because the ego needs external validation.
Exactly. The ego's sense of self is derived externally. Roles, possessions, appearance, achievements. It feels fragile, insecure, always needing more validation. When a partner inevitably fails to meet the ego's endless demands, the underlying fear and pain resurface, often projected onto the partner as blame or attack.
And addiction is an escape from that inner pain.
Every addiction arises from an unconscious refusal to face and move through your own pain, he says. Relationships, like other addictions, just offer short-lived symptom relief. People avoid the now because they fear facing their own pain, not realizing how easily presence can dissolve it. If they only knew how close they are to their own reality, how close to God.
This sounds like a call to make relationships a spiritual practice. How do we actually do that?
For true love to happen, he says, your presence needs to be strong enough that you're not constantly hijacked by your thinking mind or your pain body. You need to know yourself as the being underneath the mind, the stillness beneath the noise, the love beyond the fear.
Disidentify from the pain body and the thinking mind.
Yes. Disidentification transmutes the pain body. Watching thoughts makes you the watcher, not the thinker. And the greatest catalyst for change in a relationship, he states, is complete acceptance of your partner as he or she is, without needing to judge or change them in any way.
Radical acceptance.
It takes you beyond ego instantly. Ends the mind games, the addiction. Then he says, there are no victims and no perpetrators anymore. Relationships might dissolve peacefully then, or deepen into being together, because love is a state of being. Your love is not outside, it is deep within you.
Not dependent on the other person's form.
Not dependent on any external form. In presence, you feel your own formless reality and recognize that same life in everyone, looking beyond the veil of form and separation. That, he says, is the realization of oneness. This is love.
He also says true love is not selective. What does that mean?
It means it's like sunlight shines on everything, doesn't make one person special in an exclusive way. That kind of exclusivity is ego love, rooted in neediness. The intensity of connection might vary, but the underlying recognition of shared being is the same, whether it's with your partner, a stranger, or a tree.
And true communication is communion.
The realization of oneness. But it's often lost the moment the mind jumps back in with judgments or demands. Love can only flourish, he insists, when you're permanently free of mind identification and presence has dissolved the pain body.
He notes that relationships are reflecting a collective crisis now.
Yes, as the collective ego enters its final stage of collapse, relationships are showing the strain. But he says when disharmony arises, be glad what was unconscious is being brought up to the light. The relationship itself becomes your sadhana, your spiritual practice.
You can't force change, but you can create space for it.
Exactly. All you can do is create a space for transformation to happen, for grace and love to enter. How? By holding the knowing of the present moment's reality, the anger, the jealousy, whatever, without reacting. Unconsciousness and knowing cannot coexist for long.
So if your partner acts unconsciously,
His advice, relinquish all judgment. Judgment confuses their temporary behavior with who they truly are, or it's just your own stuff projected. Let go of judgment, be the knowing, not the reaction. Bring awareness, not more conflict.
and if both partners are willing.
Communicate feelings clearly, without blame. Listen openly, give each other space consciously. When pain body and mind identification dissolve, relationships flower, reflecting the love that's already deep within.
He also draws an insightful distinction between the main obstacles for men and women on the path to enlightenment.
Yes, generally speaking, he observes women are often naturally closer to being, maybe potentially closer to enlightenment. He associates the female principle with the receptive, yielding quality of the unmanifested, the womb of creation.
Whereas mind energy is more male.
Rigid, controlling, analytical, that's the tendency he labels male energy, though both sexes have both energies. So for men, the major hurdle tends to be the thinking mind. For women, it's often the emotional pain body.
Which connects back to dissolving the collective female pain body.
Exactly. Beyond her personal history, he suggests every woman unconsciously carries a share of this vast collective pain from millennia of oppression and suffering specific to women.
And menstruation can be a time when this awakens intensely.
Yes, that discomfort can be the collective pain body surfacing. It's a powerful energy charge that can easily pull a woman into unconscious identification, feeding on drama and negativity.
So how does a woman work with this?
He believes women are potentially awakening faster now, reclaiming their role as a bridge between worlds. Her main task becomes transmuting this pain body. The absolute first step: stop making an identity out of the pain.
Because if pain is part of your self-image, you'll resist healing.
Unconsciously, yes. A victim identity believes the past is stronger than the present. So his advice is radical. Don't use the pain body for identity. Use it for enlightenment instead.
Turn menstruation into a spiritual practice.
A powerfully transformative one. Be alert before it starts. Catch the first sign. Put your full attention on the feeling. Know it's the pain body. And simply be the knowing, the silent, observing presence. Full attention is full acceptance, is surrender. That transmutes the pain.
Finally, Tolle challenges the whole idea of having a relationship with yourself. That sounds odd, counter to a lot of self-help.
He asks, simply, why can't you just be yourself? If you're not okay being alone, you'll seek relationships to cover the unease, but it always resurfaces. The real solution. All you really need to do is accept this moment fully. You are then at ease in the here and now and at ease with yourself.
What's wrong with having a relationship with yourself?
He says when you do that, you split yourself in two. I and myself, subject and object. That mind-created duality, he argues, is the root cause of all unnecessary complexity, of all problems and conflicts.
And in enlightenment. Yeah.
You and yourself merge. Become one. There's no separate self left to protect or feed. And here's the amazing part. Once you have given that up, all your other relationships will be love relationships. Because true love is already inside you, a state of being, the realization of oneness with all life.
Wow. Okay, after exploring this vast landscape, we arrive at a profound conclusion. Beyond happiness and unhappiness, there is peace. Tolle says happiness depends on conditions being perceived as positive. Inner peace does not.
He directly challenges our usual way of thinking. He asks, do you truly know what is positive and what is negative? Think about it. How often have things that seemed terrible, failure, loss, illness, turned out to be our greatest teacher?
Leading to depth, humility, compassion.
Exactly. From a higher perspective, conditions just are. They're neither positive nor negative. They are as they are. When you fully accept what is, there's no good or bad anymore. There's only a higher good that includes everything.
And this radical acceptance is forgiveness of the present.
Yes. And it leads to the end of your life drama.
What does he mean by life drama?
Most of the bad things that happen, he argues, are actually ego-created drama. The ego feels separate, threatened, lacking, so it constantly generates resistance, control issues, power struggles, greed, defensiveness, attack. Conflict is inevitable when egos interact.
Even illness can be ego-driven.
Often stems from the ego's inner resistance, he suggests. But when you reconnect with being, you stop creating that drama. Your actions arise from peace, not reaction.
But what if your identity is tied to your drama, your story?
People often fear the end of their drama because it feels like a loss of self. But when you learn to live in complete acceptance of what is, that is the end of all drama in your life. You literally can't argue with a fully conscious person.
Why not?
Because argument requires identification with a mental position, inner resistance. You can state your truth clearly, but without that reactive force. The inner conflict stops when there's no clash between the mind's demands and reality.
Physical pain might still happen, but suffering is the resistance.
Suffering is ego-created and is due to resistance, yes. And this ties into remembering impermanence and the cycles of life. Everything changes. Forms arise and dissolve. Success, failure, growth, decay. It's the nature of this dimension. Suffering comes from clinging to forms, resisting the down cycles.
But the down cycle is necessary.
Absolutely essential for spiritual realization, he says. It strips away false identifications. All external achievements eventually come to naught.
Even our energy levels are cyclical.
Yes, and fighting low energy cycles often creates illness. We need to honor the ebb and flow. He references the Buddha's teaching that even happiness is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness.
Not negative, just realistic.
Realistic. Happiness and unhappiness are two sides of a coin, separated only by the illusion of time. Pursuing fleeting pleasure isn't the answer. True joy is uncaused and arises from within as the joy of being.
So negativity and resistance are basically the same thing. And the ego thinks negativity is useful.
All inner resistance is negativity. And yes, the ego delusionally believes negativity can manipulate reality, protect it, get it what it wants. But Tolle says it doesn't work. It stops desirable conditions from arising, keeps you stuck.
He points to nature again.
As the great teacher of acceptance, have you ever seen an unhappy flower or a stressed oak tree? Animals, unless deeply conditioned by humans, live in the lemon with integrity. He mentions watching ducks release fight energy by flapping their wings' natural wisdom, preventing negativity buildup.
Like the parrots in Huxley's Island chirping, "Attention, here and now."
A perfect reminder. And Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek, he interprets that as inner non-resistance, non-reaction, and the story of the butcher Banzan finding enlightenment.
How did that happen?
He declared, "Every piece of meat I have is the best. There is no piece of meat here that is not the best." Realizing that when you accept what is, every moment is the best. That's enlightenment.
So when you go beyond these mind-made opposites, what emerges?
You become like a deep lake. The surface might ripple with circumstances, but the depths remain undisturbed. Inner peace becomes independent of outer forms, and this leads to true compassion.
How so? Detachment doesn't mean being remote.
No, paradoxically, you become more truly connected. True relationship becomes possible only when there is an awareness of being. You see beyond the outer screen of body and mind in others and feel their true reality, the same being as in yourself.
And suffering is seen differently.
At the level of being, all suffering is recognized as an illusion caused by form identification. Compassion then has two sides, recognizing our shared vulnerability, our shared mortality as temporary forms, and more deeply, the realization of ultimate oneness. Feeling the shared being beneath the form. Our perception of the world, he says, is a reflection of our consciousness. Every moment, your consciousness creates the world that you inhabit.
So a transformed collective consciousness would transform the world.
It would affect nature, the animal kingdom. That's the deeper meaning of prophecies like, "The lion shall lie down with the lamb." St. Paul saw creation groaning for humans to wake up.
So our primary task isn't fixing the world directly.
Our primary task is to awaken out of identification with form. Then, from that awakened state, we can make a real contribution. You can't fight unconsciousness with more unconsciousness. You raise awareness through presence, practice passive resistance to negativity, love your enemies, meaning fundamentally have no enemies in your perception. Peace itself is the greatest gift to the world.
Which brings us full circle to the meaning of surrender. Tolle is careful to say what it's not.
Yes, surrender is absolutely not defeat, giving up, being passive or weak. It's the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to rather than opposing the flow of life.
Accepting the present moment unconditionally.
Without inner resistance. It's an inner phenomenon. It doesn't mean you can't act.
Can you give the example he uses? Like being stuck in mud.
Right. You don't just sit there saying, "Oh, well, I'm stuck forever." First, you accept the isness of the moment. I am stuck. Without anger, despair, blame, just accept the reality. Then, from that place of inner clarity and non-resistance, you take positive action to get out.
And that action is more effective.
Far more effective than negative action, he says, which arises from frustration or anger. The quality of your consciousness now shapes the future. If your life situation feels bad, separate out this instant and surrender to what is. Then see what needs doing. If nothing can be done now, use it to deepen surrender, deepen presence. Use it as practice.
Letting go of inner resistance is key.
Absolutely central. Acknowledge the resistance. Observe the mind creating it. Feel the emotion. Witnessing makes it conscious. And crucially, you cannot be conscious and unhappy, conscious and in negativity. Negativity needs time. Presence removes time, so negativity dies. Until you practice surrender, spirituality stays abstract. Surrender makes it real, shifts your energy to a higher frequency spiritual energy, which creates no suffering.
He uses arguments in human relationships as an example.
Yeah. In an argument, observe your defensiveness, your aggression, your attachment to being right. Feel that mental, emotional energy field fighting for power. Make it conscious. Then you might choose to drop your own reaction.
Let go of the need to fight.
Let go of that whole energy field inside. The sign you've truly surrendered. You feel very light, clear, and deeply at peace.
This relates to non-resistance in conflict. Not doing nothing, but being non-reactive.
Exactly, like martial arts. Yield to overcome. Don't resist the opponent's force directly. Any action comes from presence, not reaction. Even doing nothing from intense presence can be powerful. The ego thinks resistance is strength. Tolle says it's weakness. True strength, true invulnerability comes from letting go of resistance.
He also reframes illness as a spiritual teacher. How should we approach illness?
First, recognize illness as part of your life situation, not your core life being. Don't empower it by making it your identity, I am sick. Instead, reduce it to the present physical sensations. Pain, weakness, discomfort. Surrender to that raw experience now.
Use the suffering for enlightenment.
Yes, use it to drive you deeper into presence, but be careful not to unconsciously protect your identity as an ill person. If you feel anger, resentment, self-pity about it, that's a sign the ego has claimed it.
What about really big events? When disaster strikes, those limit situations.
Disaster, deep loss, facing death. These can crack the hard shell of the ego, he says. They can force surrender upon us. When the external world shatters, the ego often collapses.
And the advice then?
Say yes to what is. Accept what cannot be undone. If you resist, your resistance causes the suffering more than the event itself.
So no escape from pain, only a way through.
Exactly. Face the pain, feel it fully. But crucial point, don't think about it. Don't create a victim story around it. Give complete attention to the feeling, not the story about the feeling. Be intensely present with it.
Bring the light of consciousness to the darkness of pain.
That's the metaphor. Full attention is full acceptance, is surrender. Presence removes time. Suffering can't survive without time. This practice is like entering death consciously and realizing there is no death, only the false self dies.
Like the way of the cross. Suffering, forcing surrender.
Yes, that's one path. Forced surrender leads to God being. But his hopeful message is we can choose enlightenment consciously now without needing more intense suffering. Time and pain are inseparable. Step out of time, step out of self-created pain.
Which all comes down to the power to choose. What does he mean by choice?
True choice implies consciousness, he says. Without it, we're just compelled by conditioning, by the unconscious mind. He quotes Jesus, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," recognizing the widespread lack of consciousness.
Intelligence isn't consciousness.
No. You can be highly intelligent and highly unconscious. Nobody consciously chooses dysfunction, conflict, pain. It happens due to lack of presence, lack of light to dispel the darkness. Realizing this deepens compassion. If you think someone had a choice when they acted unconsciously, that's usually an illusion. The mind-identified state is inherently dysfunctional, a form of insanity. Seeing that eliminates resentment.
Wow. What an incredibly expansive and, yes, truly transformative journey we've taken through the power of now. Just to recap for everyone listening, the core actionable insights seem really clear.
They are, aren't they? It boiled down to practice.
Right. Disidentify from that compulsive thinking mind. Consciously embrace the power of the time. Now, keep coming back to this present moment. Dissolve the pain body by witnessing its energy without getting caught in its story.
And anchor yourself by feeling your inner body's aliveness consistently. Practice that unconditional surrender to whatever is in this moment.
And use your relationships consciously as spiritual practice, fostering presence and acceptance. It really all circles back to that fundamental practice of being the watcher, doesn't it? Watching thoughts, watching emotions, bringing awareness.
Absolutely. And the lasting value of Tolle's teaching, I think, is that it offers this path to genuine freedom from suffering that isn't dependent on changing your external circumstances. It's about finding deep inner peace, connecting to something timeless and immense within yourself right here, right now.
Regardless of what's happening outside.
Regardless, it fundamentally shifts your whole perception of reality from a time-bound, problem-focused struggle to, well, to present moment, vibrancy, wholeness, and that uncaused joy we talked about. It reminds you the source of peace isn't out there. It's always already within you.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If the power of now teaches that all of life, everything that ever was or ever will be, exists only in this present moment, then what more could you possibly need to achieve or acquire or become to find true peace and fulfillment beyond simply being fully here now?